Hi, I'm Trish from Wise on Home Inspections. Well, this is so exciting. You're buying a home. As one of the biggest and most important decisions in your life, you definitely want to have it inspected before moving forward with the purchase. I'm here to give you some information on what a home inspection is all about and to give you some tips on things you can look for when viewing properties. So what is a home inspection? It's a visual inspection of all your major systems: roof, exterior, structure, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, plumbing, water heaters, and electrical. We aren't allowed to do destructive testing or dismantle systems in a home, so if we see something suspect, we'll recommend further investigation. Every inspector is different on how they inspect a home. I inspect all the major systems, then check every room in the home and report on each room, which is usually just a page or two. Some inspectors are on site for 45 minutes and others take 2 or more hours. For a single-family home, my inspections take 2.5 or more hours on site, depending on size. Your home inspector should be well educated, licensed, and hopefully they belong to one of the associations that govern our BC inspectors. We have a good depth of knowledge across a broad array of topics, whereas experts have a very in-depth knowledge within one individual topic. If something is identified as needing further investigation, don't be afraid to get an expert opinion on it. On this note, it's great if you can give yourself a couple of extra days grace period between your inspection and your subject removal, just in case you need to get something investigated further. Our scope of inspection is set out by our board, and I've posted a copy on the main page of my website, so please feel free to take a detailed look. Items are excluded for various reasons, but most commonly because it would be a specialty item, not installed in every home, or require specialized testing. A couple of exclusions I wanted to explain further. Irrigation is beyond the scope of inspection because each house is unique, and it would take hours for an inspector to figure each design out and then test it properly. Appliances are also beyond the scope of inspection, so each inspector treats them differently. I turn them on so you have some kind of baseline, but we can't test them to make sure they clean the dishes properly or roast the turkey perfectly. A general rule of thumb is 10 years for most appliances, so if the home was built more than 10 years ago and the appliances don't look new, then unfortunately it's anyone's guess as to how long they will last. Home inspectors are not there to inspect to current building code, and homeowners are not required to retroactively bring their existing home up to the current code. If we had to inspect a code, we would need to know what the code was for every single year, which just isn't possible. Your inspector should, however, make suggested upgrades and point out safety items. Keep in mind that a safety item for one buyer may not be very important to another buyer. The reality is that your inspector is required to notify you of a safety item for liability reasons, but you can decide for yourself if that item is something required based on how you live in your home. Things break, repairs are needed, and sometimes items must be replaced. That's all just part of home ownership. Having a good understanding of where your home is at when you take on ownership is very important. Budgeting for repairs or replacements is important. Knowing what you're buying and making sure there aren't any major issues gives you peace of mind. We're now going to talk about a few things that can stand out during a showing if you know what you're looking at. These are higher cost items which may impact the home's affordability for you. Having a few of these items in the same property may put you in a financial situation you can't handle, but knowing that up front allows you to be prepared in advance and budget accordingly. Heating and air conditioning are two of the easy ones to notice, and they can be a bit pricey to replace. The picture on the left is an old low-efficiency furnace. They are easily identified by their large size and large opening at the front, as shown by the blue arrow. Old furnaces are now past their life expectancy, and although they may still work, statistically they're past their due date. Often it will be working just fine, but unfortunately, not even the HVAC professional can tell you when a furnace of this era will stop working, so be sure to have the budget to replace it when required. It's also important to note that these units may cost a bit more to run on a monthly basis. The picture in the middle is a mid-efficiency furnace. These are smaller units. They still have metal exhaust ducting, but there's no large opening at the front. Only units from the early to mid-90s would be approaching the end of their lifespan. The picture on the right is a high-efficiency unit. These are similar size to the mid-efficiency units, but have plastic exhaust vents, as you can see by the yellow arrow. Since mid-efficiency units are no longer available, if you do have to replace one, they will install a high-efficiency unit. Keep in mind that since these units vent differently, you'll expect to have some costs to accommodate that. For air conditioners, it's a bit different. If it looks anything like the photo on the left, you know it's at end of life, statistically speaking. The unit on the right may or may not be at its life expectancy. The inspector will have to date it to know for sure. Air conditioning units only last 15 to 20 years on average. But like furnaces, some of these units can work way beyond their expected time frame. However, you should always have the budget to replace them if they're already past their due date. Annual maintenance for both furnaces and air conditioners is important. If there's no record of service, your inspector may recommend that service be done right away to ensure there are no hidden issues. A roof is another easy one to spot. If you know in advance that you may have to replace the roof, you can budget accordingly and get replacement quotes before subject removal if needed. Both of these photos show worn and damaged shingles. Roofs in this condition are quite obvious when viewed from the ground. A roof is only as strong as its weakest point. The photo on the left shows the roof starting to show signs of deterioration, but it likely has a few years left. The photo on the right is taken at the same house and shows significant loss of granular in the valley. Since this area could leak at any time, the overall recommendation would be to budget for replacement. In this situation, it would be harder to predict this by looking from the ground. Having your inspector take a closest look as possible is important. Let's talk plumbing. Houses in the Okanagan have either copper supply lines, as seen in the photo on the left, PEX supply lines, which can be white, red, blue, or clear plastic, or polybutylene, which we call poly B. We only talk more about poly B as it's a unique situation. Poly B was used for supply lines in the majority of Kelowna homes that were built in the 1980s and 1990s. This product was subject to a class action lawsuit in the US due to early failure and leaking. Insurance companies therefore need to know if a home has poly B supply lines and whether or not the fittings are copper or plastic. It's important to discuss the details of this with your insurance company so that you know of the coverage implications or changes to your homeowner policy. You can easily identify poly B by its gray coloring. Be sure your inspector identifies if the fittings are copper or plastic so you can let the insurance company know. If you have any concerns about poly B, it's best to discuss it further with a plumbing professional. Another easy one to note is the amperage on an electrical panel. The main disconnect is the largest breaker that is usually separate from the group of breakers as indicated by the yellow arrow. This panel happens to be installed with the main disconnect at the top, but you may find it at the bottom, on the left, or on the right, depending on how the panel's been installed. There are other installations where the main disconnect is completely separate from the panel too. The house amperage is written on the end of that large breaker. It usually reads 100, 125, 150, or 200 amps. If the home has a 100 amp panel, it's likely adequate for most families, but it really all depends on how the home is lived in. If you have 4 kids, each with their own Xbox, and you want to install an air conditioner and a hot tub, then 100 amp may not be enough. Another thing to note is if the panel is full. The previous photo showed a very full panel. There wasn't much room to add more breakers. If you're planning to do some renovations, this may come into play, and you should budget for some electrical work. It may just mean adding a sub-panel, but it's best to factor all of this in and get a quote in advance of subject removal if possible. Let's talk about water. A house is not a boat, and concrete is porous. So if you dump enough water at any foundation, it will eventually come through to the interior. If you have never watched the amount of water that comes out of a downspout during a rainstorm, next time it rains, run outside and take a look. It can be very surprising. You want the grade of the ground to lead away from the house. This next item is a bit harder to spot, but it may be something you notice if you and your agent are standing around on the patio on a nice summer day. Sometimes a homeowner, in an effort to improve the property, inadvertently raises the surrounding grade of the home above the foundation. This may cause various degrees of damage to structure depending on how long it's been in place and the amount of water or snow in the area. You can usually spot this if you can't see the bottom of the last board of the siding material, or if you notice that you can't see where the exterior wall ends and the foundation begins. In this photo, you can see that the stucco siding ends and the foundation begins at the yellow arrow, just below the elbow of the downspout. Notice how the stairs and the walkway all come up the wall far above the top of the foundation. You can see that the concrete has been poured up to the stucco. When I took a look in the crawl space underneath in this area, I saw logs supporting the floor joists. Taking a closer look, and you can see that the floor joist has completely rotted out. You could actually feel the floor moving in the room above. What we couldn't see is how much damage there is within the exterior wall itself. Note that it takes years for this type of damage to occur, and this is an extreme case. I wanted to show you this example so you could see what can potentially happen over time if the lot grade is brought up above the foundation or water isn't directed away from the home. If your inspector points out any grade issues, be sure to look into it further or take corrective action. Now let's talk about those important items that you can't see at a showing but may come up in a home inspection. Asbestos. This can be found in any home built pre-1990. Keep in mind that asbestos is only harmful if it's disturbed, so if renovations are in the plans, you may have to deal with removing it. We do not inspect or test for asbestos, as that would be destructive testing. However, if I see obvious signs of a potential asbestos-containing product, I will make note of it in the report. It really only comes into play if you have big renovation plans, as workers will likely be governed by WorkSafe BC rules and regulations. Aluminum wiring is another item that may come up on an inspection. It was commonly used in homes built between 1965 and 1978, and as an electrical supply line, it's great. Problems arise because manufacturers stopped making switches, outlets, and fixtures that were rated for aluminum wiring. Insurance companies got involved because they want to make sure the home is upgraded to minimize the risk of fire. To upgrade the home, you want an electrician to make sure all of the switches, outlets, and fixture connections have been pigtailed to copper. You will need documentation from an electrician saying the whole house has been upgraded, or you'll need an electrician to check the whole house and give you that document. If the house is still in its original state, there's no imminent threat of fire, but the insurance company will likely still want everything upgraded, just in case you decide to change a fixture or switch in the future. If aluminum wiring is found, it's important to discuss this further with your insurance company and get details on what they require. Here's an example of what an electrician has to do. They take a small piece of copper wire and connect that to the outlet, switch, or fixture box, and then using a special nut, connect the copper wire to the aluminum supply line. It's not a difficult job, but is time-consuming, and time is money, so getting a quote to have this completed prior to subject removal may be prudent. An inspector may also find dark staining in the attic, and this is potential microbial growth. The only way to know for sure exactly what it is would be to take a sample and send it to a lab for testing. If your inspector finds this, don't worry, it's fixable. But if you don't deal with the minimal staining seen in these two photos, over time you may end up with this, so it's best to just take care of things. Localized staining is usually due to a fan vent not venting to the exterior properly. Generalized staining, like we saw in the previous photo, is usually caused by insufficient ventilation in the attic. It can be treated and the dark staining removed. This repair is easy but a bit labor intensive. Often the insulation needs to be removed to allow proper access to sheathing and soffits. Once the wood is treated and cleaned, additional ventilation is added and new insulation is added back in, as most of the existing insulation was either removed or is crushed by the workers. Since the cost of this varies by job, it's best to get a quote for this prior to subject removal so you're prepared. Okay, we're almost done. If I haven't lost you yet, let's talk briefly about hot water tanks. This is an insurance item. They like the tanks to be no more than 10 years old, and although electric tanks last longer, insurance companies don't seem to care and lump them all together at the 10-year mark. Again, it's a budget thing. If the insurance company forces the issue, you need to have the budget to replace it, even if it's still in good working order. The age of the hot water tank is often hidden in the serial number, so you'll need it inspected to determine if it's at end of life or if there are any other visible issues. If you are in love with the charm of the older homes located close to downtown, make sure you're prepared to work with the old construction that comes with it. Most of these items should be discussed further with your insurance company. This is not an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of some of the original items that may still be found in an older home. Matching your skill set and your budget to the right home can sometimes be a challenging one. If the home appears to be in disrepair, then expect there to be a list of maintenance items that will need doing. If you see an old roof, old furnace, old air conditioner, then prepare for those items to be highlighted in the inspection report. If the home is older, more than 50 years, make sure you're prepared to take on all that comes with owning an older home. If any or all of these things are combined with a person who isn't handy or doesn't have the spare budget, then you may want to decide to write an offer on a different type of home. Every inspector runs their business and inspections differently. Some use a camera and a notebook, some use an app on a phone or tablet. Inspectors set their own price, and some may offer various packages. My business is pretty automated, but I'm always happy to chat with you. I work on an iPad, my reports are more detailed than most and are created as a PDF with lots of photos and emailed to you on the same day. My pricing is posted on my website and is very transparent. I'm happy to have you with me for the entire inspection or for you to come at the end for a summary. If you're out of town, I always schedule a call so I can give you a summary and answer any questions. I work anywhere from Peachland to Lake Country and will go to Big White and Vernon areas for a travel fee of $50. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found some good tips and some interesting information. If you have any questions or if I can be of assistance in any way, please reach out. I'd be honored to help you with your next home inspection, and in the meantime, happy house hunting.